Let's be real for a second. The economy? It feels like this giant complicated machine, right? You hear all these buzzwords on the news, inflation, GDP, interest rates, and your eyes just kind of glaze over. It sounds like a secret language that only experts are supposed to understand. But what if I told you that the entire thing, all of it, could be understood with just one single idea?
Seriously, could we really unlock this massive, intimidating system with a single key? That's what we're going to try and do today. We're going to take this huge topic and see if we can trace it all back to one single fundamental concept. You ready? Let's dive in.
And here it is, the big idea. The key that unlocks pretty much everything is scarcity. That's it. This one word is the bedrock of economics. It is the entire reason the field even exists. Scarcity explains why things cost what they do, why you have a job, why countries trade with each other, and at the end of the day, why you just can't have everything you want. So, let's break down how this single idea basically rules our world.
So first things first, we've got to get a handle on what scarcity really is. It's the problem that the whole field of economics was invented to solve. And it's not just about, running out of stuff temporarily. It's a permanent condition of being human. Here's the official definition. Scarcity just means that we humans want a lot of stuff. I mean, our wants are pretty much unlimited. But the resources to get that stuff, things like our time, our money, raw materials, they're all limited. Think about it. If we had an infinite supply of pizza, the field of economics would be totally pointless. But we don't. And because there isn't enough of everything for everyone, we are constantly forced to make choices. And that's the absolute core of it.
Let's make this super simple. Imagine your favorite artist announces a huge concert in a stadium that holds 20,000 people. Sounds like a lot, right? But what if 200,000 people want to go? Boom, that's scarcity in action. The seats are a scarce resource. And what happens next? Well, ticket prices go through the roof. A whole secondary market, scalpers, pops up out of nowhere. People are competing like crazy just to get in. Scarcity didn't just create a little problem. It created an entire microeconomy around this one single event.
Now let's look at a much more serious example. In a place that gets plenty of rain, you probably don't even think about water. You just turn on the tap. But in a region that's hit by a major drought, clean water becomes incredibly scarce. Suddenly, it's one of the most valuable resources there is. People totally change their behavior, governments have to step in to manage who gets what, and its price, whether you measure it in money or just sheer effort, goes way, way up. Scarcity can literally change the way an entire society operates.
And this is a brilliant way to see how scarcity changes over time. In our digital world today, we have a ton of information, right? An abundance of entertainment, endless content to scroll through. So what's become the new, super valuable scarce resource? It's your attention. Every single app, every streaming service, every website is fighting a war for just a few seconds of your limited focus. Why? Because in a world drowning in information, your attention has massive economic value.
All right, so scarcity forces us to make choices. But how do all those little choices add up to create an economy? Well, this is where the basic mechanics of how markets work are born. Because every time you decide to do one thing, you're also deciding not to do something else. And this brings us to a really important concept, opportunity cost. It's just a fancy way of saying it's the value of the next best thing you gave up. So choosing to go to college for 4 years means giving up 4 years of a potential salary. Choosing to buy a shiny new car might mean giving up that big vacation you were planning. Every single choice we make, big or small, has an opportunity cost, and it's all because of scarcity. So how do we get more of the things we want when our own resources are limited? Simple. We trade. And this is where specializing becomes so powerful. Let's say you're way better at growing apples, and I'm better at growing bananas. It makes zero sense for both of us to do a kind of meh job at growing both. Instead, we specialize in what we can produce most efficiently, what economists call our comparative advantage, and then we trade. I focus on what I'm good at, you focus on what you're good at, and then we swap. In the end, we both end up with more apples and bananas than we could have ever produced on our own. And when you mix all of this together, scarcity forcing us to choose, and our choices leading us to trade, you get a market. Now, a market doesn't have to be a physical place like a farmer's market. It can be Wall Street or eBay, or even you selling a video game skin to your friend online. It's any system where buyers and sellers get together, guided by what the famous economist Adam Smith called the invisible hand.
And that invisible hand is really just this constant dance between supply and demand. Supply is simple. It's how much of something is out there. Demand is how much people want it. If demand for something shoots up but the supply stays the same, the price is going to rise.
If the supply suddenly goes way up but demand doesn't change, the price will fall. And that magical sweet spot where the amount people want to buy perfectly lines up with the amount people want to sell, that's called the equilibrium price. And this little dance determines the price of almost everything you buy.
Okay, so far we've been talking about individual choices. You and me, apples and bananas. But how do we take this idea of scarcity and apply it to a whole country? How do we even begin to measure the output of millions of people all making choices at the same time? Let's zoom out and take the macro view.
Whoa, look at that number. That is huge. $28.7 trillion. So what is that? Well, that's the gross domestic product, or GDP, of the United States. And all it really is the total price tag of everything a country makes and sells in a single year. We're talking every single car, every cup of coffee, every haircut, all added up. It's the best way we have to take a snapshot of just how big an entire country's economy is.
So how do they even calculate a number that big? Well, economists just add up all the spending in the economy, and it breaks down into these 4 buckets. C is for consumption. That's all the stuff you and I, the public, buy. I is for investment. That's what businesses spend on new factories or machines. G is for government spending on things like roads, schools, and defense. And finally, that little X minus M at the end is net exports, the value of stuff we sell to other countries minus the stuff we buy from them. It's basically a big accounting formula for a whole nation.
Now let's talk about something we've all been feeling lately, inflation. And it is tied directly to our theme. What is it? At its heart, inflation is the classic case of too much money chasing too few goods. When the supply of goods is scarce compared to the amount of money floating around, prices have to go up. If everyone suddenly gets more money, but the number of things to buy stays the same, well, sellers can just charge more. And that's why a dollar today buys less than it did 10 years ago. Its purchasing power has gone down.
You know, economies don't just grow in a nice, neat, straight line. They move in cycles. You have these periods of expansion, or booms, when things are going great, jobs are plentiful. Then things might start to slow down. If the economy actually shrinks for 6 months or more, we call that a recession. But eventually, people start spending again, confidence comes back, and we enter a recovery. Then the whole cycle starts all over again. These are just the natural rhythms of a big economy.
Okay, so if economies just naturally go through these ups and downs, these booms and busts, is anyone actually trying to steer the ship? The answer is yes. You've got 2 main players that try to manage the national economy and kind of smooth out some of those sharp edges created by scarcity.
And these 2 players use 2 totally different sets of tools. On one hand, you have fiscal policy, which is handled by the government. Their tools are things like taxes and government spending. On the other hand, you have monetary policy. That's the job of the nation's central bank. For the US, that's the Federal Reserve. Their main tools are interest rates and controlling how much money is in the system. So let's look at fiscal policy. The government collects taxes from all of us to pay for all the stuff you see here: public services, social programs like Social Security, new roads, national defense. Now, if the economy hits a rough patch, like a recession, the government can try to give it a jolt. They might increase spending on projects or cut taxes to put more money back into your pocket, all in the hopes that you'll go out and spend it and get the economy moving again.
And then there's the other team, monetary policy. The central bank's #1 job, usually, is to fight inflation. When the economy is getting too hot and prices are rising too fast, they can raise interest rates. That makes it more expensive for you to get a loan for a car or a house, which in turn makes credit scarcer. The idea is that people and businesses will borrow and spend less, and the economy will cool down. And of course, they do the opposite when they want to get things going. They lower rates to make it cheaper to borrow and spend.
All right, we've gone from a single choice all the way up to the national economy. So now let's take that one last step and look at how this idea of scarcity shapes our entire interconnected planet and what it all means for our future.
You know, international trade is really just our simple little apples and bananas example, but on a global scale. Some countries are just better at producing certain things. Brazil, for example, has the perfect climate for growing coffee. Canada has these vast plains, perfect for growing corn. So instead of both countries trying to do everything poorly, they specialize in their comparative advantage, and then they trade. This global cooperation is humanity's biggest and best solution to scarcity, allowing all of us to have way more stuff than we could ever make alone. You know, when you look at it this way, you can reframe the entire story of human progress. Think about it. Every major invention, every technological leap was really just an attempt to solve a scarcity problem.
The printing press made scarce information suddenly abundant. The steam engine overcame the scarcity of muscle power. The internet made the scarcity of knowledge practically a thing of the past. The story of our progress is the story of us fighting back against our own limitations.
And here's the catch. Scarcity is a moving target. We never really beat it. It just changes its shape. We solved the scarcity of information, but in doing so, we created a brand new scarcity of attention. As we built factories to make goods cheap and abundant, we created a new scarcity of clean air and natural resources. The game, it seems, is never truly over. So, if there's one thing to take away from all of this, it's this. Once you start looking at the world through the lens of scarcity, the economy suddenly becomes a whole lot clearer. The next time you see a headline about crazy gas prices, or a housing shortage, or some new tech boom, just stop and ask yourself that simple question. What's the scarce resource here, and how are people changing their choices because of it? And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. As amazing new technologies like AI and automation promise to solve old scarcities, like labor, what's next? What becomes the most valuable, most limited resource that's going to define the economy for the next generation? Is it going to be creativity? Maybe trust? Or maybe genuine human connection? That's the big question that scarcity leaves for us to answer.